Good afternoon. I am Lisa Lord, the Public Affairs Officer in the Public Affairs Department of the Ministry of Home Affairs, Information, and Public Affairs. And joining us this afternoon for the media briefing is the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Senator Dr. the Honorable Jerome Walcott, who is also the chair of the COVID-19 Cabinet Subcommittee. And we're also joined by members of the media. Senator Walcott will begin with some brief introductory remarks.
Thank you, Lisa. Good evening, fellow Barbadians and residents of Barbados. This evening, I'm going to make a statement as it relates to the Ministry of Foreign Trade and beyond. Thank you, Lisa, and good evening, Barbadians and residents of Barbados. This evening, I will start by giving you a statement on the activities of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade as it relates to COVID and other plans for this year. It is with great pleasure that I make this presentation to you today on some of the work and plans of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. There is nothing esoteric about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. Our work is directly determined and informed by Barbados's national priorities and domestic interests. Indeed, the work of the ministry underpins and supports all that we are and all that we do in Barbados. Hence, with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, and over the past year, my ministry has had to respond to myriad matters, including those related to the crisis in global supply chains as it related to obtaining PPE, ventilators, intensive care beds, nasopharyngeal swabs, PCR, and rapid testing kits, as well as engaging with the Cuban government to secure the assistance of doctors and nurses from the Cuban Medical Brigade, and more recently, being involved in reaching out to various countries and several entities in an effort to procure COVID-19 vaccines for our people. Here, I must highlight the importance of our regional partners and graciously thank the Commonwealth of Dominica and the Cayman Islands for assisting us with swabs in the early months of the pandemic. Later, Dominica and Grenada helped us with rapid tests, and more recently, Guyana assisted us with PCR kits and subsequently the much-needed binding solution. COVID-19 showed us the importance of regionalism in our mission to promote and secure in the international community Barbados's political, social, and economic interests. You would appreciate that an immediate priority for this ministry is now to support the economic recovery and transformation of Barbados in a post-COVID environment. Mindful of this, the ministry's contribution to the achievement of Barbados's goals of enhanced economic growth and revenue generation will be delivered in the coming financial year through a series of diversified external engagements in the following areas. 1, strengthening traditional bilateral relations and pursuing new non-traditional partnerships. 2, reaffirming multilateralism and deepening engagement with like-minded alliances. 3, increasing Barbados's trade levels by enhancing commercial diplomacy. And 4, ramping up our outreach to the Barbados diaspora and friends of Barbados community globally. The Ministry and its overseas missions will continue to focus on the deepening and strengthening of existing relationships with traditional partners in the Caribbean, Latin America, North America, and Europe, as well as the development of relationships with new non-traditional partners in Africa, Asia, Eastern Europe, the Gulf states, Central and South America. The opening of new missions and the extension of non-resident accreditations into new regions and countries will assist tremendously in this undertaking. New diplomatic offices will be opened in Ghana, Kenya, and the United Arab Emirates, with the intention of expanding Barbados's South-South cooperation, strengthening our global people-to-people contact, and also contributing to the national effort toward economic reconstruction, business and revenue generation, increased investment, and expanded trade in Barbados' goods and services, including tourism. These new missions will be at the forefront of efforts to identify new and emerging sectors that can propel and expand the Barbadian economy, and also to strengthen, advance, and diversify bilateral and multilateral action to promote Barbados' interests globally. Since independence, our mantra has been friends of all, satellites of none. It is now time for us to widen our network of friends, especially in the face of COVID-19. In Ghana, the High Commission in Accra will be used to further consolidate Barbados' relationship with Ghana, which is the ancestral homeland of a large proportion of the population of Barbados. The High Commission will work to advance multiple ongoing initiatives intended to foster a deep and mutually beneficial relationship between Barbados and Guyana, and will also pursue new platforms to advance the pursuit by Barbados of economic growth opportunities, both in Guyana and in other countries in Western Africa, hence claiming our continental destiny with Africa. In Kenya, the office will serve as Barbados' permanent mission to the United Nations office in Nairobi, which is the third largest United Nations office in the world, and which is the headquarters for the United Nations Environmental Program, UNEP, and United Nations Human Settlements Program, UN Habitat. The mission in Nairobi will therefore be able to ensure a heightened and sustained level of participation by Barbados in the work and the deliberations of both of these organizations, which play an important role with respect to programs and initiatives being undertaken in the island. On a bilateral level, the High Commission in Nairobi will also be used to further consolidate Barbados' relationship with Kenya, and also to facilitate the pursuit by Barbados of economic growth opportunities in other countries in Eastern and Southern Africa. It is to be noted that Barbados' diplomatic presence in Kenya will be part of a shared CARICOM office space, and as such, will be a working example of strengthened regional cooperation. In the United Arab Emirates, the establishment of an embassy in Abu Dhabi will serve to significantly advance the growth of a stronger bilateral partnership with the United Arab Emirates, which is one of the most developed countries in the Middle East and wields considerable power in the region. The diplomatic presence in Abu Dhabi will also facilitate the pursuit by Barbados of economic growth opportunities in that region, and will be a platform for the formation and strengthening of strategic alliances with other Gulf states. The Ministry is also moving to further diversify the ways in which Barbados represents and promotes its interests overseas. Consequently, a commercial and cultural officer will be stationed in the Barbados High Commission in Accra, Ghana, while a diaspora relations officer will be incorporated into the staff complement of the Barbados High Commission to the United Kingdom in London. In keeping with our focus on strengthening our traditional bilateral relations and pursuing new ones, it has been agreed that the following new heads of mission will be appointed: Mr. Glenn Clark as High Commissioner to Canada, Mr. Alexander MacDonald as High Commissioner to the Republic of Kenya and Permanent Representative to the United Nations Office at Nairobi, Mr. Hallam Henry as Ambassador to the People's Republic of China, and Mr. Gabriel Abed as Ambassador to the United Arab Emirates, and Mr. Francois Jackman as Ambassador and Permanent Representative to the United Nations Office at New York. I believe that the qualities, experience, and competencies of Messrs. Clark, MacDonald, Henry, Abed, and Jackman render each of them ideal choices for their respective diplomatic appointments as heads of missions at this critical juncture in Barbados' socio-economic transformation and development. Mr. Glenn Clark has had a long and distinguished career as a Member of Parliament from 1994 to 2020. Mr. Clark's service to Barbados also included appointments as Minister of Public Works and Transport and Minister of Housing and Lands, and as a teacher and as a Vice Consul in the Consul General at Toronto, working in the Barbados Liaison Service. Mr. Alexander MacDonald has had a successful career as a businessman in a wide range of industries. His extensive private sector experience encompasses his period of employment as the Chief Executive Officer of Cable and Wireless Barbados, as well as leadership of other corporate entities in Barbados, including the Barbados Private Sector Association. Mr. Hallam Henry is a multilingual professional, fluent in Mandarin, with hands-on experience in the Chinese business sector and keen insights into Chinese politics, having lived and studied there for several years. Mr. Henry also has experience in business development and investment facilitation, as well in the promotion of Barbados as a premier center for global business and economic development. Mr. Gabriel Abed is an experienced businessman who is widely recognized as a leading international authority on digital currencies and blockchain technology. Mr. Abed was the first entrepreneur to set up a blockchain company in the Caribbean, and has also played a leadership role in the establishment of companies engaged in digital currency offerings. In addition to his private sector experience, Mr. Abed has worked with government as a consultant and has been active in the NGO sector, and more recently has been based in the UAE. Mr. Francois Jackman is a career Foreign Service officer with extensive experience in promoting and advancing Barbados' interests internationally. In addition to his multiple posts in the Barbados government, Mr. Jackman has worked as a journalist and also served as the Chief of Staff to the Secretary General of the African, Caribbean, and Pacific States Group, and as co-director of the Confucius Institute at the University of the West Indies. Of course, Barbados enjoys long-standing friendly relations and mature multidimensional partnerships with both Canada and the People's Republic of China. Mr. Glenn Clark and Mr. Hallam Henry will therefore be assuming the leadership of diplomatic missions which have been in existence for several years. Similarly, Barbados' permanent mission to the United Nations office in New York, to which Mr. Francois Jackman will be deployed, is a well-established diplomatic office which promotes and protects Barbados' interests in the international arena. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade is also moving to further diversify the different ways in which Barbados represents and promotes its interests overseas. Consequently, a commercial and cultural officer will be stationed in the Barbados High Commission in Accra, while a diaspora relations officer will be incorporated into the staff complement at the Barbados High Commission to the United Kingdom in London. We now propose to engage in an enhanced platform of commercial diplomacy, working with both the private sector and the public sector in order to deepen trade relations with other countries and bring about an increase in Barbados' exports of its goods and services. Enhanced commercial diplomacy will lead to an expanded network to support trade, especially South-South trade. It is the Ministry's intention, over time, to place additional commercial attaches in other overseas diplomatic missions, and to better utilize the honorary consul network in this endeavor to build on opportunities for trade and business. The Ministry will also be advancing the country's economic interests abroad through enhanced engagement with the Barbadian diaspora and friends of the Barbados community. The diaspora community is an underused asset with regard to its networks, skills, and resources, and the Ministry intends to more purposefully leverage the power of the diaspora and Friends of Barbados groupings in order to systematically facilitate and enhance their contribution to Barbadian society and economy, especially through innovation and entrepreneurship, partnerships in various sectors, sustainable philanthropic initiatives, and attractive investment opportunities. In this regard, Ms. Everett Lewis will be appointed as the Diaspora Relations Officer in the High Commission to the United Kingdom, and Mr. Phil Phillips as Commercial and Cultural Attaché in the High Commission to the Republic of Guyana. The aforementioned will take place within the framework of a renewed country team mechanism and concomitantly with the development of an efficient coordinating mechanism for external engagement, which the Cabinet approved only last Thursday. Turning now to Barbados' bilateral relations across the rest of the globe. In North America, the Ministry will actively engage with the new administration in the United States of America through its overseas missions in the U.S. and primarily its embassy in Washington, D.C. Barbados will continue to adopt a proactive posture in lobbying U.S. lawmakers and engaging with the federal government. Key priorities include the return of U.S. leadership to the climate negotiating process as an opportunity to secure a new climate financing architecture that meets the scale of the climate crisis in small island states. Support for the initiatives launched by Prime Minister Mortley with regard to debt restructuring, debt deferrals, and other instruments. And of course, the issue of the Vulnerability Index, which relate directly to small island development states like Barbados. In our hemisphere, having established a new mission in Panama last year, the ministry will be developing a new Latin American strategy. Latin America offers a great deal of potential for trade, investment, education, healthcare, disaster management, hemispheric security, and cultural diplomacy. Our missions in Brazil, Panama, and Venezuela will be involved closely in this exercise, both from their place of residence as well as their non-resident accreditations. Within the Caribbean community, the ministry will continue to pursue Barbados' priority of increased regional engagement and strengthen integration, particularly as it relates to our joint cooperation agreements with Guyana and Suriname. Within the wider Caribbean region, I must mention the importance to Barbados of the progressive strengthening of its partnership with Cuba, inter alia through the presence here of the Medical Brigade from Havana, and I express our sincere appreciation to the government and the people of Cuba in this regard. I wish to draw your attention now to Asia in general and the People's Republic of China in particular. You will be aware that even in the midst of the global pandemic, China has continued to provide support to Barbados in our fight against the novel coronavirus through the donation of considerable quantities of PPE and other items. Remarkably, China is one major global economy that has continued on its growth path throughout 2020 and thus far in 2021, and is expected to continue on this accelerated growth path. More broadly speaking, Asia as a whole has shown great resilience and leadership during this pandemic. For these reasons, it remains the policy of this government to continue the strengthening and deepening of our diplomatic relations with the countries of this region. For example, in 2019, I signed an agreement with China regarding cooperation in the implementation of China's Belt and Road Initiative, a global infrastructure development program which will enable us to upgrade and build out our physical infrastructure. We are also looking towards deepening our cooperation in the area of public health with the support of medical teams coming from China. These are just two examples of how this valuable relationship with China continues to grow from strength to strength. I also wish to draw your attention to the expansion of Barbados' diplomatic network in Asia. For the first time in decades, Barbados in 2020 appointed an honorary consul in Tokyo, a Barbadian honorary consul in Tokyo. An approval has been granted for our ambassador in Beijing to be accredited on a non-resident basis to Japan, which is a very important bilateral partner. Barbados is also working to accredit our embassy in Beijing to Singapore, South Korea, Cambodia, Vietnam, and Thailand, so as to develop relationships with these dynamic countries and to provide more opportunities for Barbadian goods and services in those markets. Barbados' gratitude for the generosity and solidarity of India in the ongoing provision of technical cooperation and most recently 100,000 units of the Covishield vaccine, as well as PPE for our fight against COVID, is a matter of public record, and I take this opportunity to reaffirm our deepest appreciation to India. Turning to the continent of Africa, I've already reflected on Barbados' current priorities for Africa in speaking earlier about the benefits that will accrue from the opening of diplomatic missions in Nairobi, Kenya, and Accra, Ghana. I will at this point just emphasize Barbados' appreciation for the team of nurses who have come from Ghana to assist us in the area of critical health care. With respect to the Gulf states, I also previously highlighted the importance to Barbados of developing and strengthening its bilateral relationships in this region, and the fact that our new embassy in Abu Dhabi will be used as a portal for us to this part of the world. I take this opportunity to recall the significant donation of PPE and supplies to fight COVID, which was generously made by the government and people of UAE last year to Barbados and other CARICOM member states. The United Kingdom remains a key partner for Barbados. Our historical relationship has modern-day benefits for both countries, and I look forward to participating actively in the 10th UK Caribbean Ministerial Forum, which will be convened virtually on March the 18th, to discuss issues of significant relevance to Barbados, including economic resilience, the vulnerability of small island development states, the climate crisis, and the COP26, in addition to disaster preparedness and trade for development and multi-dimensional security. Turning to the continent of Europe, the Ministry and its embassies accredited to the European Union and its member states will increase the coordination of their efforts to deepen Barbados' bilateral relationship with partners in Europe, with the aim of strengthening our cooperation with European institutions and Barbados' relations with traditional partners. In addition, the Ministry and its embassies will work towards forging new relationships and partnerships with those European countries with which we are not yet fully familiar and that are not familiar with us. The new partnership agreement recently concluded between the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States and the European Union, and expected to be signed later this year, presents a very important comprehensive opportunity for Barbados to obtain support for its priorities. This new agreement, which is anticipated to last approximately 20 years, establishes a strengthened political partnership between the OACPS and the EU to generate mutually beneficial outcomes on common and intersected interests and in accordance with shared values. In bringing to a close this part of my statement on Barbados' bilateral relationships, I wish to note that the Ministry will continue to work with the countries, as I outlined, and I wish now to turn to the issue of reaffirming multilateralism and deepening engagement with like-minded alliances. Multilateralism has always been one of the cornerstones of Barbados' foreign policy, and due to its rules-based systems, multilateralism has remained an essential tool for advancing Barbados' development, economic, political, security, and environmental agendas. Barbados is unequivocally committed to a diplomacy of peace and prosperity through international dialogue, and we recognize the unique role that the United Nations plays in guaranteeing the sovereign equality and independence of small states in the international community. Barbados' belief in the United Nations is why we have taken the step of establishing a third permanent mission to the United Nations in Nairobi. This permanent mission will join Barbados' permanent missions to the UN headquarters in New York and the UN office in Geneva, which serve as important portals for our work in the international community. The priority issues and strategic interests that Barbados will continue to pursue with like-minded allies in these 3 UN locales include the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, laid out in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the establishment of a multidimensional vulnerability index for small island development states and middle-income countries, given that vulnerability is a significant factor affecting trade and development assistance, and adequate means are needed to tackle high debt levels and the continued decline of correspondent banking. The creation of an inclusive intergovernmental body on tax matters under the UN to counter the imbalance that exists between OECD countries and developing countries within the context of settling international tax norms. Emphasizing the nexus between the development and international peace and security, and taking action to address the security challenges facing the region through the proliferation of small arms and light weapons, and recognizing the multidimensional nature of security, which also includes food security. Strengthening the international frameworks dealing with the climate crisis, financing for development, small island development state issues, and the non-communicable diseases. It is for this reason that Ambassador Elizabeth Thompson will now be based in Bridgetown with special responsibility for matters of climate change, small island development state issues, and the law of the sea. As I close, I wish to note that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade is in the process of modernizing and restructuring its human resource complement, organizational structure, and operational processes. These steps, which are so very critical to the existence of a fully capable and fit-for-purpose team, will underpin the success of the Ministry's future endeavors. In addition, the Ministry is pursuing the upgrading of its IT infrastructure capacity, both at headquarters and in the overseas missions, with the end result of having an enhanced platform of digital diplomacy and the use of innovative technologies in the delivery of Barbados' foreign policy and international trade policy objectives. Using technology, we hope to revolutionize the way in which Barbados will conduct its diplomatic activities. Like many other ministries, we've had to reduce our budget for the upcoming financial year. And like the rest of government, we will work tirelessly to promote and protect the interests of Barbados and Barbadians, while utilizing our foreign policy initiatives to give us elbow room domestically to create opportunities for our people. We don't need large embassies to expand our global footprints, but this government will always be committed to creating global citizens with Bajan roots. I thank you.
And thank you as well, Minister Walker. You're also supposed to provide today's COVID-19 update as well?
Certainly. The information I have, and I'm now being another cap for the benefit of the press, being that of chairman of the COVID subcommittee, the cabinet subcommittee. The number of tests done, this is a report for the 13th of March. The number of tests done was 475, and the number of new positives, 13 new positives, of which 7 were male and 6 were female. 7 of the 13 new positives were persons who would have been sent to the Harrison's Point previously for assessment. And it clearly indicates that there were 4 Barbadians and 2 non-Barbadians. Clearly, this shows the continuing trend. I believe for the past week, the past 7 days, we've had a number of days in which the positivity rate has been below 5. This is a good trend, And I believe the Prime Minister spoke on Thursday and gave additional figures which show that the trend is in the direction which we would like it to be in. Clearly, we are not out of the woods as a people in Barbados. And clearly, that's why there's been an easing of the restrictions, an easing of the curfew. But we need to be ever vigilant. And we need to follow the protocols and adhere to those protocols. In addition, I would like to briefly state that as it relates to the lab, results are coming within 24 hours. The ministry has embarked on there are a number of hotspots, various areas across the island, where they have been going in and doing surveys, doing assessment, and doing testing, not only of primary contacts, but also to persons in the areas. And this is now being followed by some vaccination of persons in those areas. So that we enter into serious communities, doing the assessment, identifying houses where there might be suspicious cases, doing the testing, and then there's that education of the people, advising them about the use of the vaccine and the importance of the vaccine. And the third phase is that vaccines are being provided in limited quantities for those persons in those communities. And this is a very targeted process which is ongoing. There are some small clusters, family clusters, and also some small clusters in communities, which the Ministry of Health and Wellness is satisfied that they are on top of in terms of their contact tracing. As it relates to the geriatric hospitals, and I believe that they all have settled, the New Dawn, which was one of the places, and the other nursing homes have all settled. Issues related to the geriatric hospital are currently settled. The Queen Elizabeth Hospital still continues to have some cases both among the staff and the patient. And of course, the issue there was the kitchen and the kitchen staff, and I believe that is now under control. As it pertains to the vaccination campaign, I was informed that at about 2 p.m. today, approximately 51,200 Barbadians had received vaccines, and this process is ongoing. As we are aware, we are now focusing on those persons over 70 years primarily.
Minister Walcott, as we go over now to the media, let me introduce you to the journalists joining us. We have Colville Mounsey from Nation News, Regina Selman Moore from the Barbados Advocate, Ian Bourne, the Bajan reporter, Anesta Henry, Barbados Today, and Akil Lovell from Starcom Network News. I'm not sure who wants to go first.
I have a question regarding since the original vaccine application via WhatsApp has now been temporarily shelved, when is the new system to acquire the jab going to be rolling out? Is it going to take into consideration the fact that the WhatsApp application for people over 70 is for a demographic that is not necessarily familiar with that social media platform? And for those that are, can we get a system which actually replies? Because many have been just, they've applied to Digicel, they applied to Flow, and they didn't even get thanks for your interest. We will get back to you as soon as possible.
I believe the vaccination committee recognized the issues as it was related initially to that system, and they're working assiduously to rectify the situation. They recognize the errors in that initial system. But I can say the focus, as you are aware, is now on those over 70, and they're going through the records, which those persons you're describing that would not have received responses. Some of them have had the vaccines in the interim, but they're going through the records first to identify those persons before they put in place another system of appointments. As you would appreciate, they want to deal with persons who were in the system already before they now roll out a new modified system, and they would have then to go through it all again. So they're working on those persons, and I believe that there's expected to be a new system in operation before the end of next week.
And Senator, the doctor, I also wanted to get a little bit of clarity with regarding to the curfew situation. From Monday, it's going to be 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. But what about the supermarket and other places that are operating 8 to 4? Are their hours going to be extended, or do they remain at the 8 to 4 capacity?
As I understand it, the curfew now goes from 9 p.m. to 6 p.m., and those businesses, supermarkets, will be allowed to extend their opening hours to 6, and I believe in some cases to 7, once they can make provision for their staff to be home by 9. So that is the understanding, that you will, when extend the period in which time they'll be open, in which time persons can do their shopping.
Yes, Mr. Walker. Much outlined what is a very robust diplomatic and foreign trade um, initiative. Could you give me an idea within the context of COVID-19, within the context of air travel being currently decimated as it is right now? What's the plan for your ministry in executing what seems to be quite an ambitious initiative? And as a follow-up question, could you also give us, the public, some insight as to how COVID-19 has set back the foreign trade ambitions for 2020, 2021 as well?
As your first question, obviously with COVID, it hampers, the establishment of these missions. What we've been using the opportunity now to do is to have an extensive orientation process for the new envoys. And this has been ongoing for the past 4 weeks, not only within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, because I spoke of the new coordinating mechanism which we hope to put in place. So they're having sessions with various departments of governments, BIDC, Invest Barbados, various ministries, a comprehensive orientation process. I mentioned the use of the technology, and this is something that we will be utilizing much more. I spoke to the fact that and gave the impression that these missions are going to be lean and mean, that we will be utilizing the technology more so. And there are a number of interesting activities being planned in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs utilizing technology, which will be rolled out during the course of the year, and you will be kept informed and probably invited to the launch of some of these. As it relates to trade, obviously, the global trade patterns have been dealt a serious blow. Global supply chains have been all in chaos. And we recognize in Barbados the importance of, for example, the food chain and the importance of being able to supply and maintain food supplies in a situation like this. I think COVID has taught us that we have to be more robust. We have to plan, assiduously plan in terms of trade and issues. And as I said earlier, recognizing the importance of cooperation and collaboration. I should say that at the WTO, Barbados currently chairs the Council for Trade and Environment, and that we've been elected to serve as one of the vice chairs of the 12th WTO Ministerial Conference scheduled for November this year. And we certainly intend to push the agenda of Barbados and small island development states and their vulnerability in terms of pandemics or in terms of hurricanes, etc., to deal with this matter. But it is an area that I think that we could speak about for quite a long time. But when you have countries that supply large quantities of maize or corn, and then within those countries, in the face of a pandemic, they say that they're not allowed to export them. And you are well aware of the issues that we face with ventilators and other medical equipment. I spoke about countries assisting us with nasopharyngeal swabs. At the outset, back in April, May, there was scarcity of nasopharyngeal swabs to even do a test. And these are things that we have to really sit down and discuss on a multilateral basis going forward.
At the CARICOM level, the COVID-19 would have underscored the importance of greater collaboration and the need to work together. Outside of the COVAX facility, when it became evident that there was going to be a mad global scramble for vaccines, it has been a criticism of CARICOM that we have been a bit slow in getting together in trying to procure more jobs, etc. Is this? Do you see this as a failing in some sense of CARICOM, and do you see this as an area that definitely needs improvement going forward?
I don't know if I want to criticize CARICOM for that. I mean, the COVAX facility was there. Traditionally, we used Gavi. Gavi became part of the COVAX facility to acquire vaccines through Pan American Health Organization. But this time we had access to the African Medical Supplies Platform, and CARICOM as a whole has been allocated 1.8 million vaccines on the African Medical Platform, and this is through the Secretariat. A number of countries, including Barbados, Barbados has an allocation, I believe, of 56,000 vaccines on that African Medical Platform. The issue is not the Secretariat, but waiting on individual countries, in terms of, I'm offering you 1.8 million vaccines, you're coming as a CARICOM, but we need to have the funding as a CARICOM, as a grouping. So that has caused a little delay, but certainly Barbados has paid into that. A number of countries have paid into that. And we expect to get vaccines from the African Medical Platform in short order. As you said, approaching other countries, as we've had, and I alluded to it at the beginning of my presentation, that we've had several conversations. I've been tired writing letters to agencies, to countries, to companies, and they direct you to the COVAX facility as small developing countries. I think you have to understand that Barbados, with a population of just under 300,000, and when it comes to companies wanting to sell vaccines, and we're looking to sell millions of vaccines, they don't see small countries in the Caribbean as a priority. Hence why the Director General of WHO has spoken about it, not only for the Caribbean, but in terms of less developing countries, and the need to have availability for vaccines to all persons, in spite of them being the developed countries or developing countries. Thank you. I don't know if you're still there. I don't see you anymore.
Yes, I am still here, but you answered my question to some extent. But what I was getting at is along the line of you mentioned the point that Barbados is a small territory, 300,000 people, well, less than 300,000 people. But combined, CARICOM has a few million people, and jointly it would have appeared more attractive to suppliers if we had come together a long time ago outside of the COVAX facility to purchase vaccines. And that seemed a bit late in coming.
I told you that we did it with the African Medical Platform where there was availability. You were saying that we should have approached whom? Approached a supplier, a company, as a group of companies in the Caribbean?
Well, that was one of the...
That is what you're trying to say?
Pretty much, sir.
I don't know that I can criticize CARICOM for that.
If we may switch hats quickly until some other member of the media wants to jump in, feel free, because I don't want to seem like I'm hogging the event. But if you may switch hats quickly to your position as the chairman of the subcommittee. Now, CARFA would have stated that there has been a CARICOM territory, Caribbean territory, that has shown a variant of the COVID-19 virus, which, according to Dr. Joyce St. John, appears to be somewhat resistant to our AstraZeneca vaccine. Now, could you give me an idea, since the discovery of the UK variant in Barbados, have we been consistently doing sampling to CARFA to find out if there are the presence of other variants here in Barbados, or if we have actually developed our own variant itself?
A number of questions that I can't answer, and I don't want to hazard guess up. As it relates to testing for the British variant, I know that CARFA offers to CARICOM countries, I think it's a maximum of 10 samples per week in any 1 week. Barbados has submitted. I can't tell you that they submit every week, but they've submitted more than one occasion. And it was confirmed in the past that we had the British variant here. I believe this is a situation in the entire Caribbean. I think the discussion now is there the South African variant or the Brazilian variant in the region? I don't know that CARFA has confirmed that to any one island. What I can tell you is that when CARFA discovers a variant, that information is shared between CARFA and that country. They don't necessarily publish it throughout the region and say that there is this variant. I saw in the newspaper recently a reports of some other variant in some northern Caribbean country, and I've heard since then, I'm waiting for it, that there is to be rescinded, and it has been denied and disputed. So I don't know that that is what you were speaking about. But I can't rely on newspapers entirely. You would appreciate this is a scientific matter, and one needs accuracy, objectivity, and scientific proof.
Q Level Starcom Network News. Just following on from Carville's question, the Prime Minister last month said that Barbados is looking to be able to facilitate its own testing for the COVID-19 variants. How far along are we on this?
I think the Prime Minister spoke about this 2 days ago, actually. We've had initial discussions. We've had a Barbadian who is involved in genetics, a geneticist in Canada. And we've had a number of Barbadians who've expressed a desire to return home and to work in this area. Next week is the estimates debate, and I believe if you listen, you will hear that there's been provision made. The Prime Minister is adamant that we will expand this facility at the Best of Santos to allow for us to do genomic testing. At this stage, obviously, for COVID and the variants, if any, but in due course to get into the whole area of genetics as it relates to cancers, as it relates to other diseases. It is the plan of the government to get us into genomic testing and genetic research.
Okay, and next question. Some countries across the world have started introducing vaccine passports for travel, saying it as one of the better options for safe traveling during the pandemic. Has there been any consideration by government to introduce this here when the tourism sector picks up?
I don't want to say that it is a vaccine passport. There has been initial discussion about what happens when persons who have had vaccines coming into Barbados or indeed leaving Barbados to go to other countries. This is being discussed. We believe in Barbados that that is something that we should really be considering. We should be focusing on vaccinating as many people as possible within Barbados before we get into that. Within the region, I believe Caymans has a protocol on persons who've been vaccinated, and I know that some other tourism destinations have come up with the protocols. But in Barbados, I would say this is at a rudimentary phase now. We're just discussing the possibilities, recognizing the limitations of the vaccine as it relates to transmissibility. It has been shown that the transmission rate can be reduced, but all of this is still in the realm of science and further research.
With regards to variants that can hamper our vaccination effort, you have the Brazilian variant, and you now have this unnamed territory that is still yet to be determined. What's the plan? What's the plan in terms of is there going to be any attempt to restrict travel in any way from countries that have these variants that are resistant to the vaccine of choice in Barbados?
First of all, the vaccine, these variants, and every time you read almost daily, there's a different set of research. I think initially it was said that the South African variant was not, that AstraZeneca would not be useful in that. Then subsequently we were told that was not the case, that it was not as effective with those who had mild symptoms, but more effective with those who were very ill with the South African variant. I believe with the Brazilian variant, there's still discussion as to the effectiveness of all of the vaccines to the Brazilian variant. As it relates to restricting travel to Barbados from these countries or indeed to the region, I think, as you would appreciate, tourism is almost zero in Barbados, and certainly persons coming from South Africa, the chances of getting the South African variant in Barbados or indeed the Brazilian variant, I think we would have to focus on what is happening in the United States, where we are now seeing, I think there's a New York variant and there's a California variant, and these are the things that we need to focus on. But I think all of the science shows that the vaccines are all effective in terms of controlling the symptoms in whatever variant it is.
Senator, the doctor, I was just looking at a message I got here via Telegram. One of the readers here was asking, how come there have been no allocation of batches to private doctors to ease the pressure at the various polyclinics?
as far as I know, a number of private doctors from BAP have volunteered and are part of the vaccination process. If you mean batches to give to persons to charge their patients for vaccination, we are not at that stage yet. We have been using doctors from BAP, doctors who have private practices, to assist in the process of vaccinations, both at the clinic and also in terms of visiting persons who are, as we call, shut-ins, those persons who are quite ill and are not ambulatory.
And in your diplomatic part, which we heard extensively earlier, has Barbados received any indication from India that there is some sort of quid pro quo for having received the gift of the 100,000 vaccinations? Are we being asked to vote a particular way at the United Nations?
Not as far as I know, but what I can tell you is not the first time, as I alluded to and also in that speech, is during the course of last year we received pharmaceuticals, we received PPEs from India, we have received assistance through the India United Nations Development Fund for sustainable development, and we have received assistance throughout the year. There's no new demands, as you would say.
The reason I was asking is because there's a story that is supposed to be coming out of Guyana where India was indicating that they had wanted oil in exchange for the 80,000 vaccinations that they had donated.
I can't comment on your story.
At this time?
Good evening.
Good evening. I just have two questions for you. The first one is in relation to the diplomatic relations. You said there's an opportunity to also strengthen trade relations. So I'm just wondering, in terms of the countries that you've listed, will we be receiving any further assistance in terms of assistance for our pandemic? Are there any specific projects you can speak to? I know you're now getting off the ground, but can you give us a little background information?
These new issues are not specifically for the pandemic. Remember, I spoke about post-COVID in terms of the economic development of Barbados. We have received, as you are aware, that some Ghanaian nurses are here. Over 100 Ghanaian nurses are here at this point in time. From the UAE, I said in my speech that we have received considerable quantity of PPEs. This happened last year. I believe it was June or July, from the UAE. Barbados has benefited from UAE already in terms of renewable energy projects for Barbados Water Authority has benefited through two projects from UAE. So we have benefited from some of these relations already. As it relates to Nairobi and Kenya, remember I spoke particularly in terms of the UN agencies being there, the UNEP and those which we hope to be able to access by being present and to get what we can from them.
Just a second question. We also heard that government is looking to expand its testing capabilities, and that will also include some random testing. Can you tell us how soon that may come on stream?
Random testing has started already. When I spoke briefly about the Ministry of Health and Wellness, I spoke to the communities going into these community hotspots, and they have been doing not only in the houses identified, but they have been doing random tests. We recognize that focusing your testing in hotspots and based only on contact tracing, that you're putting yourself probably at a disadvantage, because you're focusing in areas where you expect to get COVID. Perhaps if you did more random testing globally in Barbados, perhaps you might find that if the trend is correct, that your positivity might not be what you think it is now. You're doing testing in areas where you're looking to find positives, but you're not really doing the random tests in as far globally in the island as you should, and they're doing more of that now. But as I said, the positivity rates for the last few days have been below 5.
Yes, Minister. You give me an update as well as to the number of persons in that require primary care at this moment, critical care at the isolation facilities, at the primary facilities.
Just have to look it up. I have the report here with me. Just give me a minute. I'm going to find it. In terms of the Harrison's Point facility, that's the one you're asking about? You're asking about
Yes, sir.
Harrison's Point?
Yes, sir. Yes,
In the
sir.
primary.
Primary, yes.
Primary at Harrison's Point, 15 patients currently. They're 15 and the occupancy is 38, so there's a 39% occupancy. There's 17 patients in the secondary facility where the occupancy is, where they have 42 beds capacity. And in the tertiary section of Harrison's, there's 77 patients and they have 121 beds.
Could you give me the ratio of young people still, as well as if there are any patients on ventilators at this moment?
I can't tell you if there are any on ventilators. I don't, that is not on the report. They speak of young adults, 17 to 40, and I see here one in the secondary isolation facility and 10 minors in the tertiary facility. And 2 at the hotels, which are the ones that are not bright, they have no symptoms. I can see here about, it looks about 26, roughly 26. 26 in hotels, and at Harrison's I see 10. Overall, the numbers of people who are, obviously, the current totals are down to 258. You'll appreciate that we've had lower positive numbers this week, and you've been discharging a number of people from facilities. So whereas 2 weeks ago you were up in about 700, over 700, you're now down to 258. Thank you.
Minister Walcott, we're getting ready to ease some more restrictions and open up some more sectors on Monday. Prime Minister Motley said she's happy with the level of compliance she's seen. From your perspective, going forward, are you happy with how the numbers are trending in terms of the pandemic? And what is your message for Barbadians, even as we look to reopen on Monday for the sectors? Thank you.
I thought I had given it earlier when I spoke. I said that the numbers are looking in the right direction, but I don't want us, we are not yet out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination. I want Barbadians to be cautious and adhere to the protocols, avoid going out unless it is necessary, and avoid taking unnecessary risks. But we really have to be careful and to act, to protect ourselves and to be a brother's keeper.
Minister, we know that businesses such as gyms will not be included in the next phase of opening. Can you give us an idea, if the positivity rate continues to drop, can you give us an idea of what date you guys are looking at to allow gyms to be reopened?
I don't know that I can't give you a specific date. What we are doing is almost like a titration process. We closed down the country. Now we are gradually opening. We are monitoring the numbers. We are monitoring the number of positive cases. We are monitoring the adherence to protocols. And we are doing that as a gradual process. What I can tell you is that the directives and the act that will take effect at midnight tomorrow night will end on midnight of the 27th. And there'll be a new set of directives for coming into action then, because this one only lasts until the 28th. And I can't tell you what will happen then. What I can tell you is that there's Easter weekend coming up, and that is a time when persons would like to have, go out and celebrate and have various activities, and it's something that we'll be very mindful of as we come to you on the 27th to decide what are we going to do in the next going forward. But of course it will have to do with how the numbers are doing, if they continue to show the downward slide, how we feel about Barbadians being responsive and adhering to the protocols. Thank you.
Well, if
Senator to the doctor.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Which one? Okay, me. All right. Yes, sir. In the diplomatic capacity again, one of our longest diplomatic partners has been the People's Republic of China. They're in the process of fine-tuning a vaccine. Has any progress been made towards perhaps achieving a similar donation like that which we received from India?
I believe you're speaking about the Sinopharm vaccine, which is on the WHO. They expect it to receive WHO approval shortly. We have had discussions at the level of the ministry, has had discussions with the Chinese mission here and China relating to the Sinopharm once it becomes available and once it has attained the WHO approval. I said at the beginning that I was kept rather busy in foreign affairs, making calls and writing letters, and Sinopharm is one of them.
Are there any further questions at this time? Senator Walcott, do you have any closing words?
Just to tell Barbadians that we are doing much better than we were doing 2-3 weeks ago. I want you to continue to adhere to the protocols. Don't take unnecessary risks. Avoid interaction as much as possible. Wear your mask, sanitize, keep your distance. Remember that you must not only take care of yourself, but also you have to be your brother's keeper. That together we can get over this, we can control this. And that I just want you to maintain your peace and serenity. Remember, Sundays are days when activities are restricted, and that you should use those days to be reflective, to meditate, to pray to your God, which depending on your religion, and to, meditate on these things. And we will get over this eventually in the not too distant future. But we need all of you to play your part, to adhere to the protocols, and to remember that we're all in this together. I thank you and have a good evening.
And let me thank Senator Dr. the Honorable Jerome Walcott, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, who's also the chair of the COVID-19 Cabinet Subcommittee, members of the media, and you for joining us. Good evening.